How are you?
Rabbi Yehuda. Welcome, Shalom. How are you?
Thank God.
You don't sound Italian. I thought you'd be like Vinny.
When I get mad.
Forget about it.
Yeah. Italian Americans are not the Italian, what we call Italo Canadese, they're usually the children of Italians, and they have the inflection in the voice, but they don't necessarily they don't speak it, or they don't. So
I've been to Italy.
Oh, have you? Where?
Rome. I was flying back from Israel on Alitalia, and then I had a layover in Da Vinci Airport, but it was late. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, so I took the last train into the center of Rome, and I walked everything all night. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. We just got married in November, and the beautiful thing about it is, the community is very centralized near Piazza in Jerusalem. All the kosher restaurants are there, and it was like a bunch of people came for the wedding, obviously, and for Shabbat they were surprised that you don't necessarily make an appointment, but when it's Shabbat, you can go and eat, and you just settle up later on in the week. It's a beautiful community. There's a lot of trust. Because a lot of people are traveling, they don't have the ability to make a nice Shabbat dinner, obviously, in a hotel room. Mm-hmm. So I'm always glad when people visit, because it's very good to support. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of supporting kosher establishments. But in Rome, literally when it's not Shabbat, at least 50% of the clientele, if not more, are not even Jewish, because the food is so good.
Cool.
Anyway.
Cool. So
I'm glad you like it.
Thanks. Are you an FFB or you're a Baal Tshuva?
No. I wouldn't say FFB, but close. My parents are not overly religious. They grew up religious. They weren't. And then I still went to yeshiva. A lot from my family is very, very frum. A lot aren't, actually. My parents are in the middle. Mm-hmm. I went to Hebrew school, but I only went to yeshiva when I was in high school. I didn't go through, we have a local elementary system.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So you're familiar with a lot of the stuff I teach. What would you say you have the biggest problem with?
I remember many years ago, actually. Are you the one who did the videos on the Black Hebrew Israelites?
Yeah, that was me.
They very much, I've seen them in Toronto, and they confuse me. It's just so bizarre in my mind. But I'm wondering, would you say you're promoting conversion, or you're not as opposed to it as some, or do you feel that there should be a lessening of what if you want, maybe won't say no 3 times, maybe we'll, you know what I mean? What's your angle on that?
I'm promoting conversion. That being said, if somebody comes to convert, or we reach out to someone to educate them properly, to get them to want to convert, I could almost guarantee you that the result of someone who leaves his friends and family, unfortunately, goes through that type of torment, I could almost guarantee you that we would have produced a more secure, a more devoted Torah-keeping individual than someone who just happens to be born into some pedigree, i.e. born Jewish and let in because of that.
Okay.
Which is really what the Kiruv movement does nowadays. But yeah, I encourage people really to consider becoming Jewish, which is ultimately the same thing. Yeah.
So this is my issue with that. Because I come from a very interesting community where obviously people were taken away from Jewish families. I don't know if you've heard of the story of Eduardo, I want to say Mortago. He was deathly ill at one point, and the Catholic maid got him baptized thinking he was going to die, and then later on she ended up telling the authorities that he's really a Catholic baby, and they took him away and ended up becoming a priest. And why I mention that story is I personally think that there's a lot of people out there that have Jewish neshamas, and for whatever, as time goes on.
I don't believe in this whole notion of the Jewish neshama, by the way. So maybe we could talk about that afterwards. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sure. So for me, I think there's a good idea to keep it open, the idea of promoting conversion, but really, I don't say in the Lubavitcher sense what they do with Russians, but kind of in that same way, right? Because there's a huge Sephardi community. There's a huge, there are a lot of, 1/3 of Sicily at the time of the expulsion, up to 1/3 was Jewish. Right now, there are maybe 200 Jews out of 10 million people. So there's something there. So in my mind, I think it's a good idea. But in general, this is what my objection to that would be, my objection to that is the idea of getting a convert, of finding a convert, someone, or promoting it, is that the way we're taught, as you probably know from from that perspective, is the risk of that person converting and then going off the derech, the severity or the impact of a rotz is so great that it would have obviously been better if they didn't take on to be Shomer Torah Mitzvot. You see what I mean? So if someone merits the place in Ha'olam Haba, then, and by being himself, whatever he is, a goy who's a decent human being, basically, a good person, then really why should your efforts be spent on changing that when the standard that person has to reach is so high, and if at the end of the day the net gain is a net loss, right? So you think of the world in terms of kedusha, because I don't know what your stand on it, but I obviously look at the world as in kedusha in that sense, and in the kedusha of the world, obviously, since Har Sinai is going down, and we don't need to help it by necessarily bringing someone in who could, and I'm talking about every ger. There are ger tzedeks that are just crazy, and we talk about Jewish history. When I hear so-called, Haredi Jews say, I don't really care much for gers, or I wouldn't let them marry my daughter, or something like this. But yet they ignore uncles, they ignore name a famous Jew. They probably have that background, or if you go back into times of the Torah, it was there, So that, I don't agree with that, but on the flip side, I think that people complain about the strictness, and I don't necessarily mean the government of Israel strictness, but they complain about the strictness of different Beit Din, but I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think it should be difficult because the level is so high and so hard to meet that chas v'shalom someone makes convert, or someone converts, that the mitzvot, if they can't live up to it, or they don't even, what if they don't even want to live up to it? Like some Rabbanim are now saying, well, we'll find out if they didn't live up, then the gerus is not accepted. Well, I don't believe that either. I believe once they've done it, and that Beit Din has signed off on it, it's done. You can't take away.
Okay, hold on. Okay. All right, so let me respond. I think the basis of your line of thinking stems from this idea of a Jewish neshama, of a Jewish soul, personified with what appears in the first parak of the Tanya, that the soul of the Jew is almost like a chelik mamash of Hashem, and the soul of the non-Jew comes from the sitrach, from the unclean klipot.
Right. And so, for the record, I've never read the Tanya. I'm not really interested, so I can't I won't.
But this is where the idea really comes from. It comes from the Arizal, and Tanya made it popular, and the Arizal just made the Zohar popular.
But I'm just saying that since I've never even opened the Tanya, okay, just so you know.
Okay, fine. So if you walk around thinking that non-Jews are intrinsically impure, then by definition, you wouldn't want to welcome them to Judaism without proving another idea pushed by the Tanya and the Arizal, that if somebody does convert to Judaism, it's because they were Jewish all along. Now, mind you, this idea is not in the Talmud, it's not in Tanakh, it's new, it's Kabbalah. Which is why I think that our attitude towards converts changed post the 13th century, post the Zohar.
Right. Well, the Zohar.
You said.
But I don't believe. Okay. For the record, again, though, I don't believe that non-Jews are impure, because that would go against a lot of other issues that I have. Right. So I'm not.
Wait.
A purist.
So you can't say that a Jew has a specific soul connected to Hashem and a non-Jew doesn't, and the non-Jew is not inferior.
Well, that's where we differ on Am Segula. So for me, Am Segula, I would never say it's chosen. I hate that term. I would say it's particular or peculiar. So it's not that Am Segula is like this trophy.
Right.
In fact, some people it's the other way around.
In the Chumash it says that if you keep my mitzvot, then you'll be my Am Segula. So it's still conditional. So this idea of a Jewish neshama is saying that someone is special to Hashem, apart from what he believes and how those beliefs guide his behavior, which is why you have Chabad standing in the corner putting tefillin on people who don't even believe in God.
Yeah. Well, for me, I would take it back in a much more metaphysical way and say that if you want to say predating Arizal, predating the Zohar, if you want to say that Am Segula is a concept, And it's a concept that if I believe in, an all-knowing, all-powerful Hashem, then I'm going to say that neshama was meant to be part of the club, the kahal, before anyway. So it doesn't matter if they were at Har Sinai or they're, obviously you're talking about Arizal and talking about all these neshamas, like 600,000 neshamas. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to at Har Sinai.
I'm saying that Chazal never entertained the idea of a different soul. In other words, according to Chazal, according to the Torah, we all have the same soul. Now, some people choose to keep the Taryag mitzvot, and some people don't. And that's it. And that's how you really should separate the world between the decent and the indecent, and not between people who are ethnically Jewish and those who are not. So I think that lays down the premise for everything else you said. Apart from Kabbalah, most of what you said is built off Agarata, like the notion that a Gentile has a chelik on Olam Haba because he keeps the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach is one opinion. Right. And mind you, even the Rambam contradicts himself in a few places because, the Rambam's famous not for bringing his own ideas, but for quoting Chazal. The Rambam writes in Asur chapter 14 that when someone comes to convert, we tell them in an encouraging fashion that only Israel has a share in the world to come, but then in Hilchos Tshuvos and Hilchos Malachim, his personal opinion is that someone who keeps the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach is one of the Chasidei Umat Olam. That's his opinion. This is an ambiguous notion. What everyone agrees is that Torah-keeping Jews have a chelik on Olam Haba. That's 100%. There is no doubt about that.
The point being, you're promising Gentiles something you can't deliver. In other words, we don't know for sure if Gentiles get to heaven or have a share in the next world for keeping the 7 laws. It's just opinion. But what we are certain of is that a Jew does.
And you're saying...
If they keep
right. Absolutely. And it's not just if they keep the mitzvot. The Rambam said that if they keep it because it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu by HaKodesh Baruch Hu, it's not the 7 commandments, it's more like 8. They have to keep it because they believe that it came from Moshe. But then you said that if we make a Gentile a Jew, it would be akin to Lifnei Iver. Because if you make a bad Jew to Lifnei Iver,
okay, go ahead.
Putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person because you had someone who could in some way theoretically get a place in the world to come by just keeping 7 laws, but now he has to keep 613 commandments. He's probably not up to the task, and now you just made a bad Jew. With that line of thinking, bouncing it off halakha, it's actually better to be a bad Jew halachically than to be a good goy. Why? Because al pi halakha, a goy is chayav misa, chayav mita for breaking any one of the Sheva mitzvot, even for stealing something less than a Sheva pruta. A Jew is not. A Jew just has to repay what he stole. So it seems like it would even behoove non-Jews halachically to become Jews and not be the best Jews than to strive to be the best goy al pi halakha, because they're liable to death penalty without a pre-warning, with one witness for breaking any of the 7 laws. And I really think it's a myth that converts are more likely to drop Judaism than a Baal Tshuva is.
Just so we're clear, there's a couple, I assume you're talking about maybe an extreme Litvish opinion that talks about impure souls when you started, or this belief that converts are more likely not to. I don't believe any of that to be true, personally. I'm just saying the risk of a convert doing that is problematic. That's, and obviously...
Why is it more problematic than a secular Jew doing it, or a Jew who came back doing it?
I never said that. It's not more problematic than a secular Jew doing it that came back. I'm saying it's more problematic if he had...
Are you against Kiruv?
Not against Kiruv per se. I think, well, how do I say this? I think Kiruv is definitely a great thing. The Lubavitch Kiruv, I don't know about...
Wait. How can Kiruv be a good thing, which is proselytizing by Jews for Jews, and encouraging Gentiles to become Jewish, not such a good thing? A secular Jew who's not aware about the mitzvot is not liable for the mitzvot. This is a principle in halakha.
So hold on. So you're telling me a secular Jew that walking down the street in Miami doesn't know that he shouldn't eat pig? Of course he does. Secular Jews I know lots of secular Jews. I don't know what secular Jews you know, but the ones I know, this is anecdotal. Obviously, these are the same secular Jews that when they know that will call me on Shabbat, and then afterwards say, "Oh gosh, I forgot I called you. I'm so sorry." I said, "That's okay. You do what you want. I didn't see the phone until after anyway." They know basics of the Torah. They know enough that they know. And this isn't like 1930s U.S. where there's a handful maybe of religious Jews in pockets. There's either an Aish, a Chabad. It's almost everywhere. So in other words,
I would say they don't know. This is more with the opinion of the Chazon Ish. He applied the whole notion of a Tinok Shenishba to every secular Jew walking on the street. What does knowing mean? And it doesn't mean that you heard about the concept. It means that you accepted it and you understood it. Even the Rambam writes in Mor Nevuchim that idolaters are not liable for idolatry unless they actually know what they're doing. Mamash. They know that they're bowing to an idol or a competitor to God. I don't see a big difference. Making a Jew liable for something and encouraging a Gentile to, kind of like giving him a nudge, because mind you, most Gentiles, especially Christians, are almost already there. You just have to get them to drop JC, and that's it. And you have a Torah-keeping Jew who, in my experience, is typically more devout than the average born Jew because he's given up a lot more. He's given up his family, his friends. And nowadays people think like... Huh?
Where does he give up his... not that I'm disrespecting the commitment that Ger makes, but not necessarily give up his friends. I know I have a couple of friends who are very, very frum guys who happen to be African-American descent, and their families accept them for being a Jew. I'm not saying it's not hard for them to do. They face discrimination.
If they're religious, they won't. They can't eat their food. They can't go to their religious gatherings.
Yeah. I thought you meant like say hi and bye. I like saying that the guys I know, their non-Jewish family go to their house for Shabbat and they respect them in their house. They don't go to their house to eat, right? But I'm saying that the guys I'm talking about are frum guys. They're also the
okay. They didn't come from a religious family. Anyone who comes from a place,
who knows? What I'm saying is I don't have a blanket sweeping statement that all Gers have a horrible time converting. That's all I'm saying. Some do, some don't. And I guess my angle more is that maybe more of a laid back approach, and that is that I don't want to sound corny, but it is a very strong, principle that I live by, and that is that the actions that I do as a Jew, especially around my secular friends, that's kiruv in itself. I don't need to say, hey, why don't you come to shul? Why don't you come to shul? I have a friend. I'm 41 years old this year. I have a friend I grew up with, not Israeli, not raised religious, Canadian born. His parents are Israeli, not religious. And I never, I used to joke with him when we were younger. He wants to come by with a shul, whatever, and then he wants to drive. I said maybe another time, stuff like that. And then at 40 years of age, out of nowhere, this guy's not married to a Jewish lady. He doesn't follow Torah, whatever, right? It's his thing. And I don't know.
I like that type of kiruv. I do that also. I don't think that we should go door to door, but there's enough Christians coming to us, to Jews, trying to teach us what our Torah says. We should use that opportunity to sort of flip it around and say, you know what? I appreciate that you take such interest in my Torah. Let me teach you what it really says. Instead of just calling them names. Think about it. If there's really no difference between a Jew and a Gentile, with the exception of keeping Torah and a formal conversion, Judaism could dominate the world, and I don't know why rabbis don't see this. Well, I do know why they don't see it, because they have gotten their lenses fogged up with Kabbalah to such an extent that they separate the world between ethnic Jew and Gentile instead of good people and bad people.
Okay, the Zohar was written by, who do you think wrote the Zohar? Do you believe the Zohar is authentic?
I personally do not believe the Zohar is authentic, but it doesn't matter. I personally believe that the vast majority of Midrashim are not authentic. Honestly, the vast majority of Midrashim were written in the Middle Ages. For sure, the majority of Midrash Rabbah was. Okay, well, the Yaggadot speak for themselves because they appear in Shabbos, right. So we assume Tanaim wrote them.
No, it's okay. I won't go as far as what you said about the Zohar, but obviously, as someone who speaks Ladino and Italian, Ladino or Spanish, and I wonder.
Ladino is the same thing as Spanish, by the way. I'm fluent in Spanish, and I've heard Ladino, and it's like Spanish, Portuguese, and Hebrew.
Yeah. So Ladino we speak is a little more heavily italicized because we're Italian, but it's the same language. And I would say that obviously every ethnic Spanish speaker will understand Ladino, but they might not speak it the same way back, right? So my point is the Zohar does have quite I would say a few smatterings of some form of Iberian root words.
Because it was written by a Spaniard. At least in my opinion, it was written by Moshe de Leon, but that's fine. It doesn't matter if the Rashbi wrote the Zohar, because that's not how halakha is developed. Halakha is developed by the Beit Din HaGadol voting things into existence. So I could believe that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar, and it shouldn't change my theology in anything. But nowadays, you have people not putting tefillin on Chol HaMoed and sitting down also when they put on tefillin, and they're changing halachot because of the Zohar. And assuming that the Zohar is just the opinion of one Tana, it doesn't have the koach, it doesn't have the power to do that. So the problem is not that we have these extra books. The problem is that we don't know how to understand halakha properly. Halakha are the rulings of the Sanhedrin. It's basically the Mishnah, and then we elevate the Amoraim, the students of the Tanaim, and this is why we elevate the Gemara. If you understand it like that, you can embrace as many midrashim as you want personally, devotionally, but you won't begin excluding Klal Yisrael because of it. If you walk into shul nowadays and you say, I don't hold by the Zohar, they'll probably kick you out. Instead of saying, okay, that's your opinion, we're all Jews, we all keep Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. No, but they'll say, they'll call it the Zohar HaKadosh, and they'll say, this is also Torah Shabbat Peh. And the words of my Rebbe is also Torah Shabbat Peh.
Ultimately, so let's say this, ultimately, there obviously the difference of opinion between you and I eventually will ultimately be, there is going to be a difference or a deference to the Rabbanan in those regards. Because obviously things have to be, as you said, there are certain things written at certain times in different places, yet we consider it as we consider it because at one point certain Rabbanim Paskin that this is going to be this and this is going to be that. We all accept that. And in a world of laws and a system of laws, whether it's Jewish laws or whether it's Jewish laws, that's a natural result or natural progression of human behavior. We can't ignore that, right? So I could turn around and say, listen, the Zohar, look, maybe it was transmitted and then it mutated in a bit of this and a bit of that, but the general gist of it is this. You can dance around it, sure. You can say it came from Shimon Bar Yochai or not. It doesn't. At the end of the day, I'm tending to agree with you on the fact that I don't really care either way. I'm not a Kabbalist, and the only thing that is Kabbalistic in any of the thought is stuff that has seeped in through, into in my case, the Litvish educational system, if you want to say, the shivot that come from that part of the world. And yes, obviously there are influences, but it's not something that we hold by as being the be-all, end-all. So, for example, big thing came out in Italy. We eat artichokes. We eat the heart, we eat the leaves, we eat the artichoke.
What's the issue? So what, Ashkenazim don't eat it because it's bugs inside it, or what?
The bugs. Yes. It's like a taco to a Mexican is an artichoke to an Italian.
They're doing the same thing with broccoli now. Ashkenazim, because you can't take out the bugs properly, but they're making it asur. So you guys eat swordfish too, right?
We have different things going on, and you broke up a bit there. Hold on, let me just get to my point.
I'm sorry.
So there's no, it's okay. No, it's not you. It's just that the phone cut off a bit when you're. I don't know what it is, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, what I said was that you guys eat swordfish because you follow Tosfos in many areas, also like Goyish cheeses. Yeah. The standards for making cheese in Italy are different than in other places in the world.
Not for the Rome Beit Din. It's not. For maybe some other ones. You're talking...
Because they probably became Lubavitch already.
No, they did. We're not Lubavitch, I promise you. They're welcome, but we're not Lubavitch. But no, we have...
Do you eat kidneyot?
Yes, of course.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. So, no, we don't do. We have our very... But anyways, we guard our minhag very closely. And the Israeli Rabbanut just recently determined that they're going to block the sale of Italian artichokes and cause a huge furore in Italy. And so at the end of the day, this is something that goes back probably a millennia. Who knows? I think the oldest recipe found written was from 1400, right? So it's ridiculous. And frankly, do I see a creeping halacha? Sure. There's definitely this form of, I call it creeping halacha. It's like creeping credentials. You're making more and raising the bar, and it's a competition between different haredim as to how more mitzvah following they can be. And when I got to tell you, in my experience in yeshiva, no one bothered us, not the Sephardi guys, and I learned with the Sephardi guys, they didn't pronounce the sav on purpose for us because they knew that's not what we said. They didn't try to change our minas. They would even say, this is something that you got to go back to your Rabbanim in Italy and ask, or your Sephardi rabbi down the road, because they weren't there. They were there to give a baseline of what they, of obviously they call halacha, of what they call Yiddishkeit. So they were respectful. Now, I know that that's not a similar activity by different Haredim around the world. I don't agree with it, where they take that Yemenite or whatever and they turn him into like a Cossack-looking guy with, perhaps.
But they don't do that with all minhagim, by the way. They just do it with Sephardi-type minhagim. Now, mind you, the Yemenites aren't Sephardim, Persians aren't Sephardim, but if you don't fall...
in my experience, I've not noticed, like, I've always been, if when I've done something, there have been people, I might be over at one of the rabbis' house, because I would stay for Shabbat, because my parents, as said, they weren't very observant, right? And I'd stay by the rabbis for Shabbat or on Hagim, and people say, why is he doing this? And then whatever rabbi I was staying by, because it's a yeshiva, so all the Rabbanim live on the street where the yeshiva is, right? And they said, well, that's his minhag, and that's what he does. End of story. No one said boo. No one said, oh, well, However, I have seen it more in the Hasidic community, where it's like, oh my gosh, he's doing this, that's Asher, that's this, and that. So this judgment of people, I find it problematic, right? And I'm not like that, so I can see where a lot of your opinions and your passion comes from, and I think, unfortunately, that especially in the States, you're exposed more to it. Whereas, I come from an Italian background mixed with a Sephardi background. I go to a Moroccan kahila. I went to a Litvish yeshiva. There's a lot less, you know what I mean? Like, there are people that won't come to my house to eat. And guess what? I don't go to their house to eat either. Right? So it works both ways. So you can't get into a conversation with an Italian Jew without it breaking into food. You know that, right? Eventually we will be talking about it. I'm just kidding. Go on.
Yeah, the same thing about Hispanics too. But conversions right now are not allowed in about 95% of the world. And worse, in places like Latin America and Europe, a Gentile is not allowed to enter a synagogue unless he's on a special list, like a list that you're a Jew in good standing or basically an ethnic Jew. Is it like this in Italy? Like, could a Gentile just walk into a synagogue?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's good.
The only minhag that's different is that they are quite particular. We are quite particular about non-Jews approaching or touching the Aron Kodesh. Yeah. And it's
like the parochet? I mean, they just get in like kiss the parochet if they want to?
No.
No, it's weird because in the Ashkenazi world, if you're a Suffolk Jew in any way, they'll for sure give you pasicha to open up the curtain, right?
I don't know the physical distance, but I think I'm remembering not even 10 feet near the Aron Kodesh, and the rationale could very well be, I'm not 100% on it, but you have to understand synagogues were ransacked by goys in Italy many times, and the idea was that this is, we're keeping a fence around the Torah. You understand? This is literally a fence. So for example, at my wedding, the photographers had to set up the cameras at a distance from the chuppah. And they weren't even on the platform. They were below the bima, if you want to call it that. Not really a bima, but you get what I mean. So now I don't know, and that's just because that's our special thing. It's not because of I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you right now. I brought my rabbi of my shul to be there with the chief rabbi. And do the wedding.
The chief rabbi was Masada Kedushin at your wedding?
Yeah. So,
look at you.
And thank you. And I brought probably the number 2 Sephardi rabbi in Canada. He'll be the chief rabbi soon. Well, not soon, but got one day, God willing, because obviously someone else has to vacate that position. That's a horrible thing to say, so I apologize. But one day he's got a lot of. He's a tzaddik, and the chesed is coming out of every pore in his body. This guy's a great guy, Rabbi Azulai. And Rabbi Azulai, he's in there, he's smicha from there. He's very, very, he went to Israel for many years after to study all over. And, when he was standing up, near the chuppah with us, the shamash, and in Italy, the shamash wear, 3-piece suits, and they wear a breastplate, kind of like the Roman legionnaires wore. So they actually wear a breastplate. And he's obviously wearing a tzitzit katan, right? because he's Sephardi, but he was taught in the Livrish environment. And just as we were starting the berachot, the shamash goes and puts a talit on him, and because that's and the funny, and he's definitely a frum-looking face, and I think he was shocked. Here's the shamash giving me a talit to wear, but again, he goes with the flow. That's the minhag, and that's what he did. Done. But you know what I mean? It's not.
Well, there's a legend in the Jewish world. I don't know how true it is. So they say that Moshe Rabbeinu traveled to Italy to plant etrogim, right? So like in Eretz Yisrael, like at least when I used to live there, an etrog from Italy was, like a great etrog. Is there any truth to this?
I doubt it. Yeah.
You heard of it before, no?
I heard of it in passing, but no, it's not something that we hold by.
Uh-huh. So a story, I'm not sure if it was in Italy or in Greece, that supposedly had the largest shul where people used flags to signal with the aliyot as they were reading them. Are you familiar with this story?
Yeah, I have. Some people definitely do that. I know in the Roman kahal, it's more of they don't call out the aliyot. So you're told beforehand. And then the shamash, if you haven't moved your body, he angrily looks at you and you move. So the shamash in an Italian synagogue is very different than the shamash anywhere else. I'll tell you right now. They're more like guards. They actually are they're militaristic almost. Right? As I said, they even wear a breastplate.
Ashkenazim, I don't even think use shamashim anymore. I mean, they have like Gabayim who do everything. But
we take it pretty, We also have an organ, which is something that is unheard of in most frum communities.
Have you played on Shabbat?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, for weddings.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and the minhag that we have is that this came from the Beit HaMikdash. This isn't something we developed in Rome, right? So that often throws people off. So, yeah.
Well, in America, it was a Reform synagogue that first brought an organ into the sanctuary.
But those were Reform synagogues.
Havdil. All right, cool. And I think we have enough here for a video. Appreciate you taking the time. Mazal tov on your wedding. And, if you're ever in South Florida, come for Shabbos.
For sure. I went, my friend has a place there. And, gosh, we went to Fuego. Wow, it's my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
I love that place.
Yeah, my friend was a Mashiach there. It's a steakhouse area.
Oh, yeah, it's it's funny because we picked out, we literally ordered, we had 4 of us, and we ordered for 10. And we took it home. It was incredible. It was, because Mamash, there's nothing like that in where I'm from, Toronto. There's not really that level, right? Because they'd be, if you had the food that we had here, they'd be out of business in a day. We have very low standards. So in Italy, amazing, but in Toronto, unfortunately, we don't have good kosher food yet. Because we have some, but not by and large. We have a bunch.
Where do you live in Thornhill?
Yes. Well, I'm in the South Corridor. I'm raised in Thornhill area, but I'm from I'm now in the South Corridor, which is more of the more Hasidic and Haredi guys here. But it's been the same likewise. Once we're done building, you're welcome up here. What was I going to say? I was going to say one other thing. I don't remember, but Yasher Koach on all the work you do, because at the end of the day, I do appreciate the fact that you do step outside and you're not afraid to discuss things with other people. I think that's one thing that Jewish people don't do enough of, especially from people. Either it's because of fear or maybe arrogance, that, I'm not going to waste my time talking. But it's very important because I'm not saying not talking to non-Jews is going to cause another Holocaust, but the idea that you don't want to talk to anybody doesn't build good relations with other people. And I think if anything we've learned, I think we need to take an active approach. I'm not blaming anyone who's ever been, hurt by an anti-Semite that they weren't nice to them. I'm saying that we need to do more collectively to share what we do, because I still meet people constantly who have no idea. I might as well be a Buddhist from the moon. They have no idea what a Jew is. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no reason for that. So I appreciate your efforts, because I've seen, you know, I mean, I don't know how you did that Black Hebrew Israelites thing without losing your brain, because it boggles my mind. There's a video by Louis Theroux. He's a British British presenter, and he does a whole thing on it, and it's mind blowing, just mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool.
Anyway,
I appreciate you. Thanks.
No
All right, man.
worries.
Be well.
All right, cool too. Be well.
All right. Okay.